Hey guys, what's going on? Welcome back to the channel. This will be video number 4 of diagnosing the engine knock and removing the engine from my 2008 Cummins that I bought. So we're just gonna dive right into it. We're gonna start with pulling the injectors out, which involves pulling the fuel rail and the lines off. Then we're gonna hop over and pull the manifold off. Basically, to pull the injectors, we're gonna take a 19, pull all those lines off there. Line from the pump and the return, that'll be a 7. Sorry, you can't see. That'll be a 17. And then there's just the rail pressure sensor at the very back. Once these lines are all loose, you can take the rail off. There's 4 10 mils that hold it on. And once that's moved out of the way, you can take these connector tube nuts off. Once the nuts are all removed, you can remove the injector hold downs. It's 8 mil on either side. And then once all the injectors are loose, you can take a little screwdriver and pop the connector tubes out, which will allow you to pop the injectors. What I like to do to remove the injectors is just take a flathead and you can kind of just put it underneath there. There's a bit of a prying surface and just twist it. They're usually not held in too badly. I mean, sometimes they do get stuck, but they're usually not too bad. Once we have the fuel system tackled, we're gonna move on to taking the turbo and the manifold off. Basically, for the manifold, you have your 6 15 mil nuts that are holding on this heat shield. And you can take a 12 mil, you can remove the back pressure sensor tube, and then that'll allow you to take the heat shield off. Besides that, you got your 2 13s that hold the mount for the EGR cooler on. That can be removed. And then you just have all your 13s that hold the manifold on. If you have a fresh virgin motor, it's gonna have these tangs, and they're basically like a holder for the back 2 cylinders. They're supposed to stop the manifold nuts from backing out. They're very annoying. You can just I usually just hit one side off with the pry bar, grab onto them with a pair of pliers and just yank them right off. Besides that, the only real other thing is this coolant line right there that you see. There is a nut that holds that on. So it's just another 15 mil. The number 6, the bottom one is a stud, the top one is... Yeah, that's the plan for the first half of this video, so let's get after it. It's kind of funny, I just said that these injectors usually come out not too bad. Man, did number 6 and number 4 ever fight me to the death. So pretty much all that we have left besides the manifold and stuff is remove these 2 coolant standpipes. We're gonna need that for clearance. Remove this lifting bracket, 2 15s, and then remove, this is like a guard for the return line. Basically, if you're in an accident, it's supposed to protect the return line from breaking. I believe it's 2 13 mils, might be 2 15s. I cannot quite remember, but we'll remove that. And then there's just a banjo fitting at the back of the head. That needs to be removed as well. Alright guys, we just got 2 bolts left holding the manifold on. One piece of advice I will give you is grab yourself a very long 1/4 inch extension, 10 mil wobble. Make sure you take the drain off the turbo before you pull the last manifold bolts. Once the turbo drops, it's a huge pain in the ass to try and get the drain off, so do that first. Alright guys, you can see the turbo and the manifold is off. It's actually the next day. I have a very horrible habit of starting to work and starting to make noise pretty late at night, and I think I said in one of my other videos, I'm trying not to piss the neighbors off too much, so I called her a night after honestly not that much work. hopefully today you don't have too many distractions, get around to pulling the engine out. Next step's gonna be, we got this ground cable right here. Gonna remove that from the block. Then we're gonna tackle taking the transmission bell housing bolts and torque converter. Basically, if you take that 10 mil and that 10 mil out, that plate flips open and you'll have access to the torque converter. You just spin it around. I'm gonna put the bolts for the dampener in the crank, then I can just turn it like that. That's all you do is just take those bolts out. So as I spin the engine over, which is not too hard to do with no injectors, you'll see there's one of the torque converter bolts. Yeah, there we go, all 6 torque converter bolts out. They're just an 18 mil. As you spin it over, you know, it should be pretty easy with the injectors out. And once you get the 6th one out, it turns over even easier. You definitely know when they're all out. So once this ground is off that I mentioned, we're pretty much done for this side of the engine. We'll hop underneath, undo the bell housing bolts. I like to put a jack underneath just so the transmission, it will obviously drop when the engine's out, but it's honestly more for putting it back in. That way you can manipulate the transmission. That just helps it line up on the dowels of the adapter plate easier. But yeah, we'll get to that. And the next steps for this side is basically the 2 10 mils that hold the fuel filter housing on. We'll undo those, flop it to the side. I believe last night I mentioned about taking that bracket off and then the return line off, 19 or 17. I can't remember the banjo size fitting, but then that's pretty much just have to undo the starter power wire, the trigger wire for the starter, and these cooler lines that mount. I'll be able to show you that once I have the fuel filter housing flopped out of the way. And then it's pretty much time to undo the engine mounts and get this thing out of here. I should mention too that the turbo and manifold removal aren't really necessary for pulling the engine out. It's just, it made it a lot easier for me to show you guys where I was pulling that plate off to access the torque converter bolts. So regardless, it had to come off anyway, but it's easier when it's out of the engine. All right, now that I have the fuel filter housing removed, you can see, if this focuses, the power wire and the trigger wire for the starter have to come off. And then we'll pop that clip off right there that holds the cooler lines on. And it's just undo the engine mounts and she's ready to come out. The bracket at the back of the head that I mentioned, it was 2 13s, and the banjo fitting right there for the return was a 17 mil. All right, so we are all nice and free now. So the engine move. Now we're just gonna take our 3/4, 18, whatever you want, undo the engine mounts. I like to just undo the nuts, tap the bolts forward, but leave the bolts in place. And then we are going to use our nice fancy Fire Punk lifting bracket. Definitely the best way to lift one of these engines out and pull her out. Oh, the old camera went for a tumble there. She is out. Not too much of a situation coming out other than this thing sucks and doesn't lift up all the way. And I knocked my phone off the hoist, but no big deal. I was gonna mention this ground on the back. It's like a body to engine ground, but maybe if you live in California or Georgia or Texas, that might be intact. Here in Alberta, I don't think I've ever seen one intact. They're always just completely corroded, and either way, it just attaches up there. Yeah, well, the engine is out. I'm only slightly terrified that it's balancing next to my Supra, but pretty solid. Funny if it fell while I was shaking it, but yeah, like I said, next step, be getting this engine in. I'm gonna pull the front timing case off, reseal it, probably paint some of these pulleys silver, you know, just kind of clean everything up, get it as ready as possible before it goes in. And then we'll have to tear this engine down and see if we can find out what's wrong with it. All right, guys, I was gonna end my video there, but I'm realizing kind of, since the engine is out and I already have a bunch of accessories off, a video for replacing the timing case won't really be long enough, so I'm just gonna include it in this video. So you seen me when I was pulling this engine out, I pulled the dampener off, the fan pulley, the idler, etc., the cover. We're gonna do the same on this engine, and then I'll show you the next steps after that. All right, so now we're where we were with the last engine, with the exception of I had to borrow the CP3 off of this. So basically, to take the CP3 off, FCA plug, banjo fitting, fuel line, and then there's 3 13 mils. You can see the studs that hold it on, and then there's a 27 mil nut in behind this cover here, and that's it, it pops. Like I said, this is a little bit different because the engine is out. Generally what I would do is just pop the fuel lines off, leave the pump on, and just pop the gear off and pull the cover off with the pump still on the back. So the next thing we're gonna do, because we're pulling the cam out, we've got these 1/2-inch dowels. So basically we're gonna put them in the push rod holes, and what we're gonna do is lift up the tappets so when we pull the cam out, it's not gonna knock any of the tappets down into the oil. The only thing that holds the cam in is there's a little retainer plate. You can see it behind the cam. Turn it over some more. There's 1, 2. There you go, 2 13 mils. You pop those out, pull the cam forward, and the plate will just rest on the back of the cam. So what I like to do is I'll undo these bolts, and then I'll line up our timing marks that I talked about. There's the 00, and there's the 0. You can see someone has marked these before. I'm not totally sure why someone would be in here. It's not uncommon for these cases to leak, so it's possible that it's been replaced before. Right, guys, we got the dowels in. So this is very much a feel thing. You'll kind of put the dowels in place, you'll feel them go in a little bit, and then you want to smack it with a hammer. You do not want these tappets falling out of the dowels, or else you're going to be pulling the oil pan and fishing them out. I don't know if you can hear this in the video, but you can feel a drag, you can hear a banging as the tappet comes up. That's how you want those to feel, nice and stiff, nice and sturdy. There's a few ways you can hold them up. Mechanics wire, zip tie them together. We have these clamps that we use, focus, for when we're doing the solid tappet conversions on 5th gens. So I'm gonna use these to hold them up. Yeah, if you want to, it's never a bad idea. You can rotate the cam a few times and that'll push them all up into their places, or help push them all up into their places. But yeah, this is a very important step. You want to make sure these are secure. Now that the cam is out, I have this nice tray that I will put in there. Just to make sure nothing falls down in there. And if you've never seen a 6.7 cam before, that's what it looks like. Here's the retainer. A little bit of wearing on the lobe, to be honest. Not quite as shiny as she once was. Next step though, we got our 4 10 mils that go up through the oil pan, through the structure. 1 10 mil there, 1 10 mil there. And then we've got a couple of 4 Torx. Oh, help if you guys can see. 4 Torx there, 5th one there. And that's pretty much it from what I recall. I guess the obvious, undo the crank sensor and then the cam sensor. Cam sensor I like to do once I pull the cover forward a bit. All right guys, once you have that all undone, you see the case moves pretty freely. Pretty much just time to pop her off. So now that our case is off, we're just gonna peel off this gasket, you know, clean the surfaces all up. And then time to get the new gasket and case back on. All right guys, as you can see, we got the surfaces all cleaned up. Actually, looks like I missed a little bit there. I have to clean that up a bit. I like to use a razor blade and carbide cleaner. Seems to work the best, especially with the lovely Liberal government taking away our good brake clean. The only other thing we have to do is, you can see this gasket is a little long. That's how they come. So we'll just mark it and then cut it along the edges of the timing case. And she should be ready to go. The only other thing we do is bead a silicone along there, bead a silicone along there, and then do across the oil pan. I do like to put a little bit in this area here before I compress it. It seems to be kind of the most common area for these timing cases to leak, so I just like to give her a second chance is all. All right guys, you can see I've got the gasket sitting in place. Nice thick bead of silicone across the bottom, and let's get this case on. All right guys, there we go. Timing case is on. We gotta torque these. There is a torque sequence. I'm pretty sure you do those and then this and this and then the oil pan last. Don't quote me. Gonna do 24 foot-pounds, I believe. I'll look it up, but it's somewhere between 18 and 24. But yeah, I will need to confirm that. Pump in place. Cam sensors plugged in. Just gotta plug the crank in and should be ready to rock and roll. All right guys, next step, time to throw the cam in. I will kind of lube it, if you will, even though it's used, just use some of this assembly grease on it. And then we will install the front main seal. I got a wear sleeve, so you clean up the crank, hammer that seal on there, hammer it into the new cover, and that's pretty much it. Just silicone. It's factory siliconed on. I did replace the water pump just because we're here and the old one made some funny sounds. But yeah, that's about it. Just remember to line up your 00 on the cam, your 0 on the crank, and she's in time. CP3 nut, 27 mil, I believe it's 90 foot-pounds. I'll have to look that one up, but yeah, that's it, good to go. I'll show you guys also, this is the front seal install tool. So basically, this is for putting the wear sleeve on the crank. It bottoms out. There's the dowel for centering it. Pushes the sleeve on there. And then this is the piece of the seal that goes in the timing cover. It's installed from the back. This will bottom out when it's at the right depth. And when I put the sleeve on the crank, I like to use some red Loctite in there to seal it. All right guys, cam is back in. Now we can put the 2 cam retaining bolts in. They were the same torque spec as the front cover, or at least that's what I do. Then we can get the CP3 gear on. I'm gonna put assembly lube on everything. Even though it's not brand new, I just like to have everything nicely lubed up. We pull our dowels out, and that pretty much wraps up this front timing case cover video. Well, basically what I have left to do is I gotta swap the starter on because this one was broken. I need to put the manifold and turbo on, get a new turbo drain. Have the BD grid heater fix, which isn't that interesting. Basically just replaces this bus bar in here, something a little more secure. And I am gonna throw a set of head studs in this engine because it is a 6.7. If you guys are interested in that, one of my very first videos actually was doing head studs one at a time in a 6.7, so you can check that video out if you want. New water pump, new thermostat, mark the dampener for TDC, and I always mark it at the bottom also, so that way I know from underneath. Leaving that cover off, so then I will remember to torque the CP3 nut. That pretty much wraps up this little mini series. Appreciate you guys. Like, subscribe, comment, all that good stuff. It helps me out, helps kind of grow the channel, and yeah, if you like it, continue watching. Thanks, guys.